see. I didn't write a script, so I hope this makes sense when I talk. When do we start? Is it already recording?
Yes, I can, whenever you're ready.
Okay. From the time I was a kid, we moved to the United States when I was 8 years old.
Okay.
And I lived in a family, in a house with 13 people, an aunt, a couple of aunts, an uncle, a godfather, my parents and my grandmother, and my 3 siblings. Okay.
Okay.
So I was accustomed to being around a lot of people.
Right.
On my mother's side, she was one of 12. So I'm one of 35 cousins. And there were always people in the house. It makes you very social. The people, everybody, Latin Americans are very affectionate. You're
Yes.
Latin American, right? You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Okay. As a matter of fact, my older brother and I, as we grew up and became teenagers, we noticed that American people don't hug or kiss each other.
No, yeah, they
And we
don't.
thought, these people must not like each other very much. Okay, so there was always this sense of difference. And one of the things that we would do, because we felt that we had to survive with Americans, okay? And if my parents would speak to us in Spanish when Americans were around, we'd say, shh.
You don't want
You know,
them to
we don't
know.
want to be different than these people, okay?
Right.
And I still haven't accustomed myself to
No.
the American culture. I still have a problem with it,
Mm-hmm.
okay? And later on, when somebody, I think it was like 20, yeah, I think in my early 20 or mid 20, something like that, somebody asked me if I ever thought of going back to Argentina, and I never had. Okay? And Buenos Aires was 6,500 miles from Chicago, where we were living. Okay, and we had come on a ship,
Okay.
not on an airplane, and it
That's
was a
weird.
very long trip. So in our minds, in my mind, and I later found out your older brother felt the same way. It was so far away. It was like being on another planet.
Yeah.
You know. So here, people that are from Mexico, they can get into a car and drive into Mexico. You can even drive to Mexico, or you can fly to Mexico City in an hour. Okay. So when I did go back to Argentina, and it was interesting because my cousins, it was as though I had been kidnapped and disappeared, never to be heard from again, you know. And I remember when we did leave, all these cousins and uncles and aunts were at the port when we were leaving. And not too long ago, one of my cousins sent a tape. He said, we were all crying because we didn't know if we'd ever see you again. Okay.
That's sad.
And I don't think that happens to people that are here in El Paso from Mexico.
No.
Because it's possible, I would imagine, that you're going to see them. I would imagine you have relatives in Mexico.
So my grandma was from Juarez, but she came here.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
the extent of
But
it.
you don't have an extended family in Mexico?
From what I know, no. I
Okay.
don't.
Well, I suspect there are a lot of people here at UTEP that do.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And I think they can relate. I've spoken with other people. I've worked in Mexico for 35 years in several cities in Mexico. And Mexicans I spoke to says, yes, they're very different, aren't they? You know, and I think one is that, as a matter of fact, I got a master's degree here at UTEP.
Okay.
And I was interested in being able to link two societies.
Okay.
Like, I run plants for French company,
Okay.
American, Canadian. So I had to figure out the culture of the foreign plant
Mhm.
and how I was going to make that function in Mexico.
Oh, okay.
So I learned the differences between the two, which is very interesting.
Mhm.
And, for example, what I discovered is that the very individualistic is the American, and the more what would you call it? The opposite of individualist, I can't think of, collectivist
Mhm.
is Mexico. Okay?
Okay.
It's, the idea is we're a group, or Latin Americans, is that we're not individuals, we're a group, okay? Which made a real difference. So that, I've written a paper on that and I can send it to you.
Okay.
I don't know if you can somehow get it out there. I wrote it for UTEP, for
Mhm.
my master's paper.
Okay.
And it talks about those differences and what the impact is. The other thing is the guy-girl thing that everybody goes through.
Mhm.
Sometime in their life, it's not
Right.
going to go well,
Right.
and it'll break your heart.
Yeah.
Well, that happened to me, of course. Um,
While you were here?
I was living in Chicago. I was
Oh, okay.
I was 20 years old, and I was in love with this girl,
Mhm.
and her family was kind of, I don't know if the word's uppity. Her father was the executive vice president of PGA Golf.
So like wealthy.
They had money, and
Right.
PGA Golf is, these golfers, like, gosh, I'm trying to think some of the names. But anyway, he was a big deal.
Right.
And she said, nothing could become of us if you don't have an education. Okay, and I didn't want to go to college anyway. I went for one semester, I didn't like it, and came home. So her saying that prompted me to want to go back to college. And I did.
Mhm.
Okay, and oddly enough, nothing became of us.
Right.
But on the other hand, the fact that I did get an engineering degree
Mhm.
is what made me go to get a job that landed me in Mexico, where I met my wife.
Oh, okay.
So it was indirect,
Right.
And as a matter of fact, I'm still in touch with this girl,
Uh-huh.
the first one, and that was like I'm 80, and that's when I was 20, like 6 years ago. We're still communicating, and I said, well, she's had somebody in her life, but I said, I want to thank you. If you hadn't urged me to get an education, I would have never met Carmen.
Yeah.
Okay? So that worked out. But I think that the impact it had on me, the way it changed me, I thought, this is not going to happen to me again.
Mhm.
Okay. This girl moved to Texas to go to college, and I was just totally devastated. And that's when I said, this is not going to happen to me anymore. Okay? I'm going to develop myself to the point where I can win anybody or anything with only a small portion of what I am.
Like have them come to you.
Well, if I wanted something, I would get it.
Right. Okay.
That I would be more attractive to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Besides, the initial personality or whatever it is, but that I would have more to offer.
Okay.
Because I remember in a psychology class, it said that when a couple mesh and really get together, if you have them write down what they value in the other, and you give it points, you compare the list and you find out that it's equal.
Oh, okay.
Like, let's say you give a point to everything that you look for, and that person has it, all the point, and they're 25 points. That other person's score is 25. Okay, and then if I look at the girl and say, what am I looking for? And there's 25 points and she has 25. This argument in psychology said that when the scores are equal, there's a probability that that'll work.
Okay.
You know, for example, if a guy, let's say, ability to support and money is important, but it's only 1 point, that's not enough. You know, like the woman's looking for more than money. The woman's looking for somebody that would be good with kids, would be attentive, would, you know, on and on and on. So, but my point is that I decided I'm going to develop myself. I'm going to get an education. I'm going to learn how to do things. I'm going to have experiences. I'm going to have life experiences and offer more. You know, I remember when I did talk to this girl again, it was almost like in my mind, she was comparing me like, you know, when you buy a car and you find out that it's got a DVD player and it's got a glove compartment that's got something in it and it's got this really neat, you know, then all of a sudden you discovered all these features, you know, and as she rediscovered each other like 40 years later, and by then I had kids, I had a family, I had run manufacturing plants, I had all these different things, and she saw me sort of like this car with all these features. You know, I know it's a funny way to put it, but so apparently that worked. Okay, that and again I was able to convince my current wife that she would want to marry me. She kids, she says, yeah, I married you because I felt sorry for you. You know, like when it seems like when women go to get a puppy, they pick the saddest one. Not the healthy, happy, really. It's just a little poor one that's in the corner, you know.
With a little
so
sad eye.
that's what she said to me. Well, listen, I married you because I felt sorry for you, you know, which was.
How long have you guys been married for?
Gosh, like over 40 years. Well, you know, quite a few. Our oldest daughter's 46. We have 3 daughters, 1 son. And I told her I'd like to have 3 more daughters and another son. Her response was, "Eso no va a pasar." You speak Spanish, I would imagine.
Barely.
Yeah, she said that's not going to happen.
Oh yeah.
And so that formed me. The other thing that had a huge impact, when I was a kid, one of my uncles that lived in the house was an artist, well known in Argentina, and he would always get us pencil and paper, would always be drawing. My mother sent us to the Chicago Art Institute every Saturday when we were kids. So I was very much into the art thing. I actually won national art awards as a kid in high school. I mean, so I got pretty good at it. I didn't particularly care for it. And when I went into the Navy, they taught me electronics. I liked it. There was somebody that said, "Mike, my brother's an engineer. If he can do it, you can do it." You know? And you know, that usual thing that people say. And so I did. I applied for engineering school and I ended up with engineering. Which brings up another thing that changed who I am. When I went back to college, after this girl told me I needed to go to college, the advisor said, one of the core courses is college algebra. So I went home, got in bed. I said, this is not going to happen. You know, Susan and I are not going to be a thing. I read a positive thinking book, which I recommend. You know, this was called The Magic of Thinking Big. It changed my thinking so much that I went from fearing one college algebra course to being an engineer, which is pure math.
Nothing
okay.
but math.
So You know,
yeah. Calculus 2 was really hard for me.
yeah. So I was me too, and which was really interesting how huge of an impact it had, and I really recommend that to read positive thinking books. That one in particular is called The Magic of Thinking Big, and I'll give you a couple of examples with this book. There was a when I started college in California, a girl heard me talking to somebody about it, and she came up to me the next day. She says, "Hey, Mike, I was listening to you telling Bill about that book." Says, and it got me very enthused. I went to the bookstore after class and bought it. I stayed up all night reading it. I feel great. Says, I feel like I can do anything. That's how good that book is, okay? I also gave it to a guy when I was in the Navy, because I was in the Navy after I read it, and he was transferred to a ship that went to the far Pacific. He sent me a letter, please send me a copy of that book. I lost mine.
Oh no.
Okay. Then the last example on that from somebody else reading it, one of my managers in the plant, the woman in HR complained about him because she said, whenever we have to reduce headcount, I need to go hold his hand to show him how to do it. Okay, who can we reduce? Who can get by without? The manager of accounting manager, she said, I always have to go with Jorge, it was Jorge's people, to get information I need to report to corporate. But I'm always having to go behind them, okay? Well, I gave him that book. It's in Spanish also, by the way. And I guess it was maybe 2 months later, both Patricia, who was the HR manager, came in to urge me that I give Jorge an increase in pay. And at the same time, Rosalinda, who was the accounting manager, said the same thing. I think, look, what the heck's going on? I said, Jorge, I just had these two come tell me that you deserve a big increase. What's going on? He says, that book you gave me. Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it kind of, I think, piques your curiosity. Like, what's that book about?
I know.
It's very easy to read. If you think you're positive, once you read that book, you realize you were not as positive as you thought you were. Okay. And one example about simply two things that are kind of interesting. And one is the Chicago Tribune, a newspaper, accused Henry Ford of being an ignoramus. Okay, and Ford said, "Hey, why do you think that?" He says, "Well," says, "let's pose 3 questions to you. One, when was the Revolutionary War fought? Ask 3 questions, historical questions." And Ford's answer was, "I may not know the answer to those questions, but I can get somebody that does in 5 minutes." Okay, so what it did is it implies you don't have to know facts, you have to know how to do things.
Yeah.
Okay, the other one that was in there, he talks about, when somebody thinks it's too late to really start on something new, which I think is common. This man said was 40 years old. He said, "I've always wanted to be in the ministry, in the church." Says, "But if I were to go back to college to study for the ministry, I'd be 45 when I got out." Right. And the question was, how old will you be if you don't go?
Yeah.
You're still going to get to be 45 regardless. So it was basically, it has a lot of eye-opening things in it.
Like, why not just do it?
Yeah, just
it's never too late.
Do it. Yeah, and the book says it in very simple terms. Okay? I think the other one, the military, they paid for my college, When people thank me for my service, I think I was stationed in Hawaii for 2 years, in Southern California, Hawaii. They paid for my college for 4 years. I want to thank you for my service.
Yeah.
So that's another thing I think people should consider, either the Air Force. I mean, you can be patriotic and you can say, I want to go in, I want to serve the country.
Yeah.
Okay? And, but if you don't want to get killed or shot at, Air Force and Navy is the way to go. Okay? And you can be a reserve, which is 2 years active duty. You learn a lot, you travel, and if the GI Bill's still around, they'll pay for your college if you don't have the resources. So that's another thing I suggest. So I think that's pretty much it.
Okay.
And so how to get ahead, how to figure out, or to get an education, how to survive a broken heart.
Yeah.
And which is probably number one.
Yeah, the time it doesn't feel like you can.
The other stuff.
But it'll work out in the end.
I mean, a broken heart. Being out of money doesn't hurt as much as a broken heart.
Yeah.
And but those are my thoughts. Let me, just in case, it makes any difference. Well, incidentally, I have this. I'm taking a course in meditation, and
Do you feel like meditation helps?
yes.
Yes.
The idea is know yourself. Isn't that interesting, that picture?
Yeah.
Let me show you something, an interesting picture.
Do you practice meditation, or were you just?
I work at it, and I'm taking it now because I want to get better at it. And let me show you. Let's see if I can find them. I'm related to somebody that was very big in the field of meditation. I think it'll surprise you who he is. Let's see if I can find it quickly. Darn it. Do you ever have that problem that you can't find a picture?
All the time. I have thousands of pictures.
Yeah, it'd be nice if you could say, find this picture, and I would find it. I will just give me a little bit of chance here. This is so weird, I can't find it. The person is my father's cousin. Let's see. I think it might be right here. This is my father's cousin, the guy on the right. The guy on the left is the Dalai Lama. He studied with, he was able to go study the monks in Tibet.
Oh, really?
And he came up with a meditation technique. He was head of cardiology at Harvard. And what his purpose with meditation was to calm your body, to reduce the stress in your body and lower your blood pressure.
Yeah.
So it's a physical thing.
Right.
Okay? The meditation we're talking about here now is thinking about your life.
Okay. Like self-reflection.
Like, why do I do what I do?
Okay.
Why do I feel this way? Why do these things make me angry?
Okay.
When I was in Chicago, when I worked downtown Chicago, I used to take the train, the elevated train, and I would sit where the driver usually sits because every car has that, and I would just sit there and I'd have an hour to think.
So you would always like practice this, like
You just think,
okay.
why do I do this? Why does this make me unhappy? Okay, why do I react the way I do? Like, why does, when people correct you, do you have brothers and sisters, by the way?
I have one brother.
Older, younger?
Younger.
Younger.
We're
Okay.
2 years apart. So not like a huge difference.
So you've been in charge of him when mom and dad were?
Yes.
Yeah. And let me give you a card. It's got my website. I kind of have it here. And I have 3 daughters and a son. And I have an article in there's my website. But I talk about the oldest daughter. And this is interesting, another aspect too, that people that from this exercise, we have, like I said, 3 daughters and 1 son. The kids were misbehaving, and my wife got upset with Susie, my oldest.
Okay.
And I said, why are you angry at her? They're misbehaving. She says, because she's the oldest.
Right. That like
she's responsible for making sure they behave. Okay. Later on, when I went to work in the plants, I discovered that women executives or supervisors were in fact the oldest female among the siblings. Interesting, isn't it?
Because they always had to.
And they, I asked in one big plant, I asked HR to bring all the oldest female siblings to the conference room. Now, they had no idea why they were there. And I explained to them, I said, I know the responsibilities you have, and I know that you carry them on at work. I know that same sense of responsibility you had with your siblings. I've seen it in the plants. Okay? And I want to let you know that how much I appreciate that you're here.
Right.
Okay? And like they were looking, said, oh, we're not going to get fired.
They're like, thank God.
Then I asked them, which was probably an unfair question. I said, how many of you were thanked by your parents for what you did in raising your siblings? Not a single hand went up. It was assumed that because you're the oldest, that's your responsibility. That comes with being the oldest, okay? And so that was very interesting. And I think if there's any people in this, they're the oldest female, they may not know that.
Do you think that's more of like a cultural thing?
Yes. Yeah. I'm not sure. I haven't experienced I haven't asked American people, are you the oldest female? Or my 35 years in Mexico in very different cities, at least I had that group to go with.
Right.
Okay. And I think people, if you find that there are young women here that you're gonna talk to about, it may open their eyes. It'd be interesting if I could get some feedback as this thing goes on, if any of this was to value them and which one it was of value.
Okay.
If realizing that they have a very special place and special training by being the oldest female, I think it would be worthwhile to hear. Let me give you something that, not this, when before I got a job with one company, they sent me to this psychiatrist that his job was to conduct tests for capabilities, personality, because these folks at ITT were having a problem. The manager wasn't executing. They were doing a big job for IBM. And so now they wanted to this testing is done for executives on ITT. Usually it's for a higher level, but they did it with me. They evaluate their executives to see how effective they are. And so what they do is they give you a lot of tests for 8 hours. And the reason I'm giving you this, it confirms the impact that what I say impacted me on here.
Right.
You know, I don't know if the professor must say you don't need or do need this, but it's kind of interesting that, well, if he reads it or if you read it, you'll see that it confirms that in fact my life was affected by things. And what skills I have as a result. It's kind of interesting. I mean, to me, I'd like to read it once in a while.
Yeah,
You know?
like, let me see how I've been
Well,
doing.
you know what's neat about this is that this man, you know, what they say, didn't have a dog in a race or a horse in a race or something like that. He's not my mother. You know, my mother would say, "I'm the great." Your mother will tell you you're the most wonderful thing and you're great and stuff, right? So you got to take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
You know, mothers say things like that, but this guy doesn't care.
Right.
You know, so there's a real value in that. And I also suggest, sometimes people don't know exactly what they should be doing for work. This is valuable. There's a set of tests that you answer questions. This may be more than you want. I think this is useful. I hope it's not useful. But what you answer questions that say, I'd rather watch a baseball game or I'd rather go to the opera. I'd rather go running outside than watch TV, okay? The purpose of this is they compare your answers to thousands and thousands of people in different fields. Okay?
Oh, okay.
And what they'll do is they'll say, your answers are very similar to people that are in medicine, or your answers are very similar to, in my case, it was engineers, public speakers, HR managers.
Okay.
That's how I compared to people, the people that thought like me were in those fields.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so for anyone who sees this, any students that see this, I don't know what I want to do. You know, there are companies that give these tests.
Okay.
And they'll say, people who think like you and like these things are in this field. You might find that interesting yourself.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, I hope
Yeah, no, it could be. I mean, it's interesting. And I've been given these tests 3 times. And what I discovered, this was the first one I had, that in each case, I had become better because I was now focused.
On which?
By what this person told me. All of a sudden it made me focus, and I realized that there's sort of a thing called full self-fulfilling prophecy, and that all of a sudden it clarified my mind as to what I wanted to do. Okay. So that's very useful. I think that's it. It's how to cure a broken heart. One way, maybe there's other ways, alcohol or drugs. You know, how to deal with your career, how to strengthen your attitude. If you don't have a lot of energy because of a very positive attitude, that's one thing I think I mentioned. And I think the value of education.
Okay.
Did you ever see a movie, what was it called, Forrest Gump?
Yes.
And that's all I have to say about that.
Yes, I love Forrest Gump.
You would always finish that way.
Yeah.
Wasn't that a great movie, by the way?
Yes, it was.
Do you have a favorite movie?
No, just because I like a lot of
lot of
movies. I would say like my favorite genre is like probably like horror or like slasher movies.
Uh-huh. You know, my oldest daughter, I put together a list, and it isn't just names. I went to